Hello everyone, welcome back to my class, Busy's classes. Last time we are doing Lost Spring, stories of stolen childhood. It was half done. Today we are going to try to finish the story, to explain it in some detail. So we have come to know about a rag picker from Dhaka, Bangladesh, Saheb, whom the author Anis Young encounters every day in the morning. She befriends him, asks him many questions, and observes many things about why they remain barefoot, what is the tradition of India, and again, then she remembers a story a man told her from Udupi. As a young boy, the story begins like this. As a young boy, he would go to a school just as adjacent to a temple where his father used to work as a priest. And he always walked barefoot, and before entering his school, he always prayed at the temple, asking God for a pair of shoes. His prayer was ultimately granted by the goddess, as the author says. So, again, the author's acquaintance with the rag pickers leads her to a place called Simapuri, near Delhi, but metaphorically far away from Delhi. Simapuri is a place just on the periphery of Delhi, yet miles away from it metaphorically. Simapuri is a place where all squatters who came from Bangladesh in around 1971, they lived there. They live in dilapidated houses made of plastics and all, tarpaulin and broken tins and all. It's a sort of slum area. Sir. All rag pickers, their children live there. They have nothing. They are only, the only thing they have is a ration card in each one of name, because political parties or the government uses them. They provide them with ration cards and all. So the author, the editor, she visits Simapuri, learns about the lives of the rag pickers, how they survive, what they do. So it's a means of rag picking is a means of survival for the people of Simapuri. So children grow up along with their parents, and they become partners in their battle for survival. The second thing, the Saheb sometimes find rupee, find a rupee. Saheb sometimes finds a rupee or a 10 rupee note as he says, while scrounging for gold in the garbage. So, one winter morning, the author, the lady writer, saw Sahib standing by a neighborhood club, watching two young men dressed in white playing tennis. He feels like going inside and playing the game, but that's why Sahib was also wearing tennis shoes, which looked strange over his discolored shirt and shorts. After some time, after some months, in fact, Sahib left his job of rag picking. He starts walking in a tea stall where he is entrusted with the work of carrying a steel canister from a milk booth. So this is the work. He was paid 800 rupees and all his meals for this job. And he asked Sahib if he liked the job, but his answer was negative. He did not enjoy the job, although he was paid 800 rupees per month, including his meals. Second, the writer goes to a place in Uttar Pradesh. The place is Firozabad. Place is Firozabad, famous for glass bangle industries, bangle making industries. Here she meets a boy called Mukesh. He is a sort of independent boy. He thinks independently. He thinks clearly. He can think clearly about his prospects, about his career. He wants to be a motor mechanic. He tells Anis young and he wants to drive a car. But now he is working in glass bangles industries. Working in a glass bangle industry. In fact, all his families, all his relatives, all the people of his clan are forced to work in glass bangle industries. The working environment in glass bangle industries in Firozabad is worse. It's not hygienic and also unhealthy, because they were put in a dingy cells and they have to slog for the whole day in dim light, and for which they tend to lose their eyesight very early in their lives. And Mukesh's family is among them. None of them know that it is illegal for children like him to work in the glass furnaces with high temperatures, in dingy cells without air and light. That the law, if enforced, would get him and all those 20,000 children out of the hot furnaces where they slog their daylight hours, often losing the brightness of the eyes. The condition, the pitiable condition of these workers, bangle makers, moves the author, the writer, to a great extent. He accompanies Mukesh to his heart. He accompanies Mukesh to his heart. They walk down stinking lanes choked with garbage, past homes that remain hovels with crumbling walls, wobbly doors, no windows, crowded with families of humans and animals coexisting in a primeval state. All like a slum area. Very unhygienic, unhealthy, dirty, and there are no system, no nothing, no method. They enter a half-built shed. In one part of it, thatched with dead grass, is a firewood stove over which sits a large vessel of sizzling spinous leaves. On the ground, in large aluminium platters, are more chopped vegetables. A frail young woman is cooking the evening meal for the whole family. There is only big pot where all sorts of leaves, spinach leaves or other things are being cooked. So it's a very unhealthy, unhygienic condition where they are living, where they are forced to live. And especially the plight of the women, especially the plight of the women folk is measurable. She is the daughter-in-law of the family, or the bahu, and she is the wife of Mukesh's elder brother. Mukesh's grandmother observes that it is his destiny, karam. That means they are fatalists. They believe in their faith. They believe that they are destined to walk in such conditions. They are fated to walk in such dingy cells, unhygienic conditions for generations to come. They cannot come out from this class, sort of, from this from this unholy alliance of the middlemen, the government, and also the police and the legal system. When the author asked a group of children, a group of people from the community, why they don't organize themselves into cooperative. But they have already fallen. But the author observes that they have already fallen into the vicious circle of middlemen who trap their fathers and also their forefathers. Even they get organized. Even if they get organized, there will be ones who will be hauled up by the police, beaten and dragged to jail for doing something illegal. So this is the vicious circle of always keeping them in perpetual poverty. So whenever she meets someone, they talk only about poverty, only about destiny, and the author comes to a conclusion that listening to them, I see two distinct worlds. One of the family caught in a web of poverty, burdened by the stigma of caste in which they are born. The other a vicious circle of the sahukars, the middlemen, the policemen, and the keepers of law. Very strange. And also the bureaucrats and the politicians. all are in unison. All are in unison to keep these people always in perpetual poverty, always in that state. But Mukesh is a sort of a rebel. Though together, though all conspire to impose the baggage on the children, on the child of the bangle makers, which he cannot put down, and before he is aware, সি জনাৰ আগতে ভালকৈ জানি বুজি লোৱাৰ আগতে he accepts it. এইটো নিজৰ ভাগ্য, নিজৰ নিয়তি, নিজৰ ডেষ্টিনি বুলি গ্ৰহণ কৰে যে তেওঁৰ দেউতাক তেনেকুৱা পিতৃ আছিল, তেনেকুৱা পিতাক আছিল, তেওঁৰ মাকে সেই কাম কৰিছিল, গতিকে আমিও মোৰ মায়ে এই কাম কৰিছিল, মোৰ দেউতাই এই কাম কৰিছিল, গতিকে ময়ো এই কাম কৰিবলৈ বাধ্য, ইয়াৰ বাহিৰে গত্যন্তৰ নাই। কিন্তু কিবা এটা তাতকৈ বেলেগ কৰাটো, do anything other than bangle making is there. In such a society, when Mukesh says that he wants to drive a car, he wants to be a motor mechanic, the author was greatly surprised. The author was greatly surprised to find a boy like Mukesh who dares to think differently from their forefathers. He wants to be a motor mechanic. That's why the author again asked him whether he wants to fly in an aeroplane. But his dream is, he dreams in a limited way. So he says that no, he has no desire to fly, no desire to drive or fly a aeroplane. So this is because he says that only few airplanes fly through Firozabad. So this is the whole story. Here the author tries to draw attention of the people, of the government, of the concerned authorities and the NGOs to the pitiable condition of these children, of these people, that they are suffering like anything for all their lives, because they are being systematically put to a process of exploitation, deprivation and oppression. So she wants to draw attention to their plight, to attention to the lawkeepers, to the plight of these small children who are put to hazardous work, who are put to work, forced to work in dingy cells, and which they legally cannot do. This is what the Lost Spring is all about. The title itself suggests that it's a story of those children who have lost the joy of their life, who have lost the joy of their lives, the mark of their lives, on account of this stark reality, on account of the stark reality of poverty and earning their livelihood by any means. So this is all about the story. In the next part we'll discuss the questions and answers. We'll try to discuss the questions and answers on Lost Spring, the stories of stolen childhood. I hope you have understood the gist of the thing. You have understood the main points of the story. So again, see you again then. Thank you so much.